so we take a look again at that important spot where you're at when that front foot lands on the ground, and we're going to get a sense of your split angle. So we're going to go from your knee, your other knee, okay? Relatively long or wide stride. What's average, and I won't say normal because it doesn't matter what normal is, but what's average is about 127 degrees. Well, we've got guys that I work with that are big leaguers I've got one guy that's 101, really narrow stride. The widest that I've seen is 144. That was a functional delivery, that was operating as Josh Beckett. Really long extended stride. Even Lincecum's only like 125. Everybody thinks his stride is so long. It's not really that wide or long. He jumps away from the rubber, but the split between his legs is not unusually long. He's in kind of the normal range. Now, when I say it's wide and maybe long or outside what's optimal for you, largely, yeah. Okay, I'm doing a video lesson, so I'll take care of it when. Okay, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks. It's based on what's going on with the rest of your body. So if your hips and your shoulders are rotating early, likely that stride is extended outside what's the optimal range for you, and your body is getting away from the back leg too soon. Okay? You get to a certain width between your legs, a certain split between your legs, and a certain stride where you can no longer stay closed. If your body weight gets away from that back leg far enough, everything will start to turn. We talked earlier about staying closed. Okay, here, I'm flying open. Well, how do you stay closed? You stay closed by not allowing too much of your weight to shift away from your back leg before your front foot gets down on the ground. Okay, there's a certain point again that you reach where you start to deliver your body weight away from the rubber, where it's going to stimulate your upper body to start to rotate. We just want to get a stride that gets your foot down before that happens. Okay, and that tendency to start to stimulate that rotation before your front foot lands on the ground is also likely what's allowing that lead foot to over-rotate, because you're turning before that front foot gets down on the ground. So you start to turn and you just kind of keep turning. So by the time you land, like we saw from that front view, we already see the lead shoulder, and we see that lead foot and lead knee turn past open. So my suspicion is that in going to work on being in a better position when your front foot lands on the ground, you may find that actually just shortening up that stride a little bit, might not be that much, might be a couple inches. It will probably help to make a big difference in keeping you closed longer. Instead of trying to just hold your shoulders closed, you can't do it. If your weight gets forward, you start to rotate before that front foot lands on the ground, you can't stop it. So we just make adjustments with where your body is at. Again, and that's where you'll see some big leaguers, when they land, will be tilted. If we look at where you're at again, it's a little bit dark. You're about vertical right here. A lot of guys will be leaned and tilted significantly back. So when they land, they're like this. Kershaw again, for example. Way high with the glove side, way low with the throwing side. Shoulders and upper body are tilted way back. Well, that's the optimal position for his upper body to be in relative to his hips. When he lands, that's what works for him. Not to say that that's where it works for you, but anything that gets you coming more forward than what's good for you is also going to cause you to rotate. Okay? A lot of times what we can do too is take a look at when you go to throw extended long toss. If you're trying to throw the ball really far, in order for the ball to go far, it has to go fast, right? So if it's going fast, whether you're throwing long toss or whether you're throwing on the mound, doesn't really matter. We want to understand how your body produces that speed. Well, generally, when you're throwing flat ground and you're throwing long toss, you put your body in a much better position, weight positioning wise, rotation with the shoulder wise, than we do when we're on the mound. So then we try to take where your body's at when you land, when you're in long toss, and get you closer to that when you're actually on the mound pitching. Okay? All right. Yeah, there goes that elbow going up. So we can watch, if you take a look at where your arm is at relative to your shoulders here. Okay. See how much that elbow goes up as you rotate the throw? Now, it's likely going to go up some, but ideally we want it to travel a little closer to back to front. You said you feel an exaggerated tendency where sometimes it wants to be, feels like it's down here. Usually that feeling and that visual perception that that's happening has more to do with the fact that your shoulders turned early than it does with the height of your elbow. Okay? If your shoulders turn early, it's going to feel like your arm is lower and dragging more around to the side. If your shoulders and your upper body stay closed, it's going to feel a lot more like it's in sync with the rest of your body. Yeah, and you can see that's another thing with that stride length. Your back foot ends up behind your front foot. So your body's not able to work past that lead leg. The bulk of the power that you generate with your lower half comes from driving and generating vertical force or pressure through your lead leg. You're going to generate more pressure through that lead leg as you get your body weight over it. Okay? If I stand up and I put my front leg out in front of me and keep my upper body back here and try to press into the ground as hard as I can't press that hard. If I get here, I can press real hard just because I'm able to use my mass to generate force into that lead leg. But a lot of athletic moves, throwing being one of them, we're going to generate energy, which we translate to acceleration based on driving or pressing into the ground. The harder we press into the ground, the more energy we draw to be able to accelerate our body. Okay? It's also why guys that are bigger tend to have an easier time throwing a little harder because their mass generates more force into the ground. Doesn't mean that it's a guarantee you do, but it's easier to do that with bigger mass. Okay? So we want to get you in a position when you land to be able to get that linear shift from back to front, which gets you over that lead foot, creating vertical force into the ground that you're going to draw to use your arm to accelerate forward to the target. It's a whole sequence. See, I'm going on and on and on and on. But that's the idea, is just putting you, that's the key, that's what the best of the best do, is they put themselves in an excellent position when their front foot lands on the ground to generate force into the ground and then draw it up and move it sequentially through their body and through their system out their fingertips with the ball right on the whip end of it. We just go, we work and work and work to try to figure out how that system works for each of the guys that we got. And in the directions and on the planes that it works, and if there's any kind of deficiencies in terms of, you know, injuries or weaknesses along the way. That's it. And it's an ongoing, ever-evolving process for every pitcher. Never ends. Always working to make it better. Okay? All right. So, yeah, again, you get really good external rotation. You see how far your arm bends back? Yeah. Catapult right there. That part of it works. And you can actually see that glove's out in front of you and your arm's doing this. So even after all, you know, whatever amount of time that you're being taught to do this, it still doesn't happen. Which is good.
And you think I'm not releasing it on front as much as I should be?
Well, I think that's going to be a function of where your body is at. I mean, you're going to release the ball. It's probably not far off of where you would be. I mean, you got to think about the path that your arm is on, okay? And this is part of what we're trying to create. There's a window and an angle that you're trying to hit with your release point, okay? Your release can only be as far out in front as you're still on that window, that kind of cone that's going to the target. right and left, up and down. The angle is generally somewhere between 6 degrees down and 12 degrees down. That's not very steep, okay? That's 0, 6, 12, barely much down, excuse me, at all. That's why downhill plane to me is like, really? Okay, so maybe if you're, 6'10", you can go to 14 at the bottom of the zone. Well, you're not 6'10", so we don't have to worry about that. So you're going to throw between 6 and 12, somewhere in there, to the top and the bottom of the zone. Well, if you're taking your arm on a steeper downward plane, you're only between 6 and 12 for a very brief period of time, farther back. So if you release the ball farther out in front, you're going to spike it into the ground every time. The more you're operating on a back to front plane, the longer you're in that 6 to 12 degree window, which means top and the bottom of the zone are easier to hit because you're in that window longer. Same thing with the right and left portion of the delivery. Your arm is traveling on an arc around your body, okay? It's not going straight from back to front. It's coming out and around. When you get that good linear shift from back to front, that arc is going to become oblong, or like an ellipse, instead of a circle, okay? When you stretch that arc out, you're in the window, right and left, for the edge of the strike zone, longer than you would be if you're just spinning in place on a semicircle or circular arc. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if you want the release to be farther out in front, you're going to continue your body's movement out in front that much longer. One of the things that we're constantly trying to do. And there's only so far that it's going to get out there, and then you're not going to be able to help but end up heading down to the ground or being too steep off to the glove side. But if we can open up that window, up and down and right and left, throwing strikes becomes a lot easier. Kind of like the bat plane staying on plane with, or the bat head staying on plane with the pitch longer. If you're matching the pitch plane for a longer period of time with a bat coming through the zone, your chances of making solid contact are much better. Again, why as a pitcher, the more we can change the plane of the pitch, the less period of time the hitter's on plane with it in the strike zone, the harder it is to hit. Okay? All right. What other questions? It's a lot of stuff. Your head's spinning a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. The idea with this is not to be overwhelming and not to, it's to be very informational, to take a look, again, at this point, kind of soup to nuts as to what's going on in your delivery and figure out what a starting point is. There's no formula that says, okay, you got to do this, 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 and this, and you'll be perfect. Every adjustment that you go to make makes a global change to your delivery. So the hope is that you start pushing some of the right buttons that have a positive global effect on your delivery. But you work on those things one at a time. And generally, our start point is, let's try to find a more optimal position when your front foot lands in the ground. A lot of it is based on feel, and a lot of it's based on productivity and how freely and well your body operates from when you land through when you release. Most of the drill work that we do, most of what the guys that are out there throwing right now are doing, is based on finding that optimal spot when they land and then operating out of it from there. Okay? As they get better and more consistent at getting to that spot, then we start working on being more aggressive out of there, more productive in terms of force production to be able to throw harder. Okay? Then we want to obviously become more repeatable. And it gets easier as we do things that are more athletic, more natural for your body, it's easier to be repeatable with those things. So back to my original point, which is we try to simplify it from here. It's a lot of information, a lot of things to think about. The design is not to make it seem overwhelming and complicated. It's to get a big picture and then figure out where to start and where to go to work in a kind of a guided discovery process of determining what ultimately is going to be the best way for you to deliver the baseball. Okay? So it goes from the laundry list of everything we just talked about to step one of, let's start to figure it out. Okay?